You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.
Don't touch that dial or change the channel because it's Sunday at 7 p.m. and you're locked into The Hard Truth with John Deaton. I am John Deaton. Good evening, everyone. It's been a big week. Remember, you can follow me at John E. Deaton1 on X. You can get my book, Food Stamp Warrior, at Amazon or on Amazon. And you can call into the show. I will read your comments, your questions, your criticisms at john@hardtruthshow.com. That's john@hardtruthshow.com. Big week. First thing we want to do is acknowledge the absolute disaster that happened in Fall River with the Gabriel House fire. Condolences to everyone that lost a loved one, and we have to give an incredible amount of gratitude to the first responders, Fall River Fire Department, volunteers. From what we know, the chief of the fire department said that that fire was destined to kill 50 people, and those first responders did incredible. Okay, now, this week in national politics, there's been one topic that has absolutely permeated all of X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And that is a fella that just seems to never die, and that is Jeffrey Epstein. And there's been a big 180. There's been a shock in the MAGA world. There has been a break, many say, because of President Trump's 180 related to the Epstein file. There was talk this week that Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, the deputy director of the FBI, that they were going to leave their post if Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, were to remain. There was a lot of speculation that this was the biggest test so far of Trump's second administration. President Trump has come out and he's told people to stop focusing on Epstein. He said he supports Pam Bondi. And we're going to unpack all of that. And some of you that follow me, some of you that followed the race against Elizabeth Warren last year know that I brought up Epstein to Elizabeth Warren on the debate stage, and I called her to her face the hypocrite that she is and the person who is not a champion for women, who only selects the women she chooses to champion. We're going to unpack that. But let's first, for a second, let's talk about this Epstein case, because President Trump, I believe, is not handling this situation the way he should. There are a lot of people that supported President Trump who are turning, and they're saying, don't insult me, because he has. He's called people who are focused on Epstein stupid people. He's called Republicans who are demanding that the Epstein files be released stupid Republicans who are only doing the job of Democrats. He's called the whole Epstein situation and the files now a hoax. And he's even called his supporters my past supporters if they're still demanding transparency on Epstein. So this is a big deal. And I got news for President Trump. It's not going away. Now, for some of you out there that are going to be, oh, there's Deaton. He was never a big Trump guy to begin with. Fool on you, man. Shame on you, honestly, because I have went out of my way to be objective and to acknowledge the many good things that President Trump is doing. The border is secure. 93% of illegal crossings are down. Trillions of dollars are coming into America from major corporations, some manufacturing like GE's washing machines and Honda and Hyundai and NVIDIA and all these other companies are saying they're pouring in billions and billions of dollars in the United States. Okay, I've given credit where credit is due, but President Trump is wrong on this issue as it relates to Epstein. And let's back up now and just remind people of why this is a big deal. First of all, Epstein was running the largest child sex trafficking operation in American history. Period. Full stop. No in place in time before have we seen a child sex trafficking operation of this magnitude. And that individual, Epstein, had contacts to some of the most powerful people in the world, billionaires. Okay, he had Bill Clinton, a former president of the United States, has flown to his island and flown on his plane dozens of times. Bill Gates, the billionaire, at his island or on his island dozens of times. Prince Andrew of the royal family in the United Kingdom, okay, on his plane, on his island. There are pictures of the prince with young girls. There's a picture of President Bill Clinton. They're clothed and he's sitting, but he's getting a massage of his shoulders by a young girl. And so there is evidence out there that is striking. In fact, Epstein, so we can rewind this back for a second. In 2007, 2008, Epstein was being prosecuted for child sex, child rape, okay? And he got a sweetheart deal because the former assistant United States attorney in Florida who was prosecuting Epstein has said that he was told to back off. Epstein got a slap on the wrist. You know, he had to register as a sex offender, but the man did less than a year and he got probation for that kind of conduct. And when this guy was questioned, why would you give this guy, this child rapist, such a sweetheart deal? He said that he was told by the Department of Justice higher up to leave it alone, to cut that deal with Epstein, and entered into a non-prosecution agreement with Epstein that we're not going to prosecute you for raping children. That's what we're going to do. Is the United States is going to enter into agreement like that. He was told to do that and stand down because Epstein belonged to intelligence. Now, we don't know what that means. We don't know if that means CIA. We don't know if that means Israeli, Mossad, intelligence. We don't know. But that's what the person has said. And this guy who's connected to former presidents and billionaires was given a slap on the wrist. And so we fast forward now, and Trump is president. That happened in 2007, 2008 with George W. Bush as president, okay? Now we're in 2019, and Epstein is arrested because he's engaging and continuing to engage in child rape. Now, when I say child rape, I want to put it in perspective for you folks out there to understand what I'm getting at. It has been told, and Epstein was questioned in a deposition by an attorney who asked him, isn't it true that on your birthday, a friend of yours sent you 3 12-year-old girls for your birthday surprise? that these 3 12-year-old virgins, they're 12, okay, their children were sent to Epstein for his sexual pleasure. That's the kind of piece of crap that we're dealing with. That's Jeffrey Epstein, okay? And that's the guy who got a non-prosecution agreement by the United States Department of Justice, and it was given a sweetheart deal because someone said up above that this guy is untouchable. He is part of intelligence. Then we fast forward. It's 2019. President Trump is the president. His attorney general is William Barr. Epstein is arrested, and he is in New York in a federal penitentiary, or in a state penitentiary at that. And this individual ends up allegedly hanging himself. And it was a short period of time. It was only a couple weeks. Jeffrey Epstein, in the middle of July, was arrested and incarcerated. And a month later, he's dead. And so why do people believe only 23% of the American people, when they're polled, believe that Jeffrey Epstein actually offed himself, that he hung himself? Okay, that means 76% of Americans believe that this guy was murdered because he had information. Now, that's just rank speculation. So let's review facts. This is called The Hard Truth. This show is called The Hard Truth. So let's review some hard truth and whether or not there is evidence that would suggest that Jeffrey Epstein didn't hang himself, didn't commit suicide, but instead was given help to kill himself, meaning that maybe he was murdered. Well, the first big piece of evidence that suggests that Epstein did not hang himself is the injuries to his neck. He had a broken hyoid bone in his neck that was fractured. Okay? That bone, when you hang yourself, is usually not fractured. Okay? Not when you hang yourself with a sheet, it would be uncommon for that bone to be fractured. Now, when we come back from the break, we're going to continue to unpack this story. Listen to The Hard Truth, and I'm John Deaton. The Hard Truth is paid for by the Deaton Law Firm. I've been representing mesothelioma and lung cancer victims for 23 years across the Commonwealth. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer and were exposed to asbestos, you contact me at the Deaton Law Firm. That's DeatonLawFirm.com. You can also reach me here at this show at thehardtruthshow.com. That's John at hardtruthshow.com. John at hardtruthshow.com. Okay, welcome back to the show. This is The Hard Truth, and you're listening to me, John Deaton, and we are unpacking the Jeffrey Epstein. Some call it a conspiracy theory. Some people just call it the truth. Now, your hyoid bone is a bone that is in your neck that is not attached to any other bone. Now, I've learned this because when I was a federal prosecutor, I actually learned the difference between ligature strangulation and manual strangulation versus hanging yourself with a sheet or even with a rope. Your hyoid bone floats in your neck. It's under your jaw, above your voice box. It helps you swallow. It's just attached with ligaments and muscle, and it's a floating bone. And so when you hang yourself with a sheet, usually that bone will move because it floats, and it will not fracture, especially if you're using a sheet, okay? Now, let alone there's people that in that jail cell that's been in the very jail cell, like Michael Francesi, who says that he was in that cell and that there is no way to hang yourself from the ceiling. Basically, they're saying Epstein used a sheet and he hung himself from the bedpost, which is very difficult to do, okay? You get away with it if you're like a little person and you're like 4 feet. You'd have a much easier time. Is it possible? Of course it is. But that hyoid bone normally does not fracture in a hanging. It was fractured, which is more common in manual strangulation, ligature strangulation. So it's not conclusive. It's just one fact, one piece of evidence. Okay, that bone should not be fractured usually, but it is. But then there were two security guards who both of them failed to check on Jeffrey Epstein. Both guards failed to do their rounds and check in and look into each cell the way they're supposed to. And both of those guards falsified records. Why did they falsify records? Why did they both? Okay, well, the guards fell asleep, they're claiming. They falsified records. The hyoid bone is broken, which sounds like someone may have manually strung it. But we got cameras. We're talking about one of the most secure federal penitentiaries and state penitentiaries in the country. Okay? And so we got to just check the cameras, everybody. Well, it just so happens that not one, but both cameras were malfunctioning that particular night. Both of them malfunctioning. So, two guards don't do their rounds, both sleeping allegedly, both falsified records, a bone in the neck that shouldn't be broken, that is broken, and both cameras just seem to not be able to work. Okay? So, that's evidence immediately that makes people think that this guy was murdered. Now, what about people close to him? His brother Mark brings out the fact that the cells are supposed to be locked, and Epstein's cell was unlocked. So there again, another coincidence that his cell is unlocked. The cameras, both of them, are not working. Both guards are sleeping. His hyoid bone is broken. As you can see, people are getting suspicious. Well, his brother says that he didn't commit suicide. Well, what about his handler, this Giselle Maxwell, or her name's Ghislaine, I believe, Maxwell? Well, she was interviewed. Now, this is the person who is sitting 20 years in prison because she helped Jeffrey Epstein secure young girls and help rape and sexually abuse young women, including minors. She said that there's no way his personality, he would kill himself. Look, this dude was a narcissist, man. He loved himself. He loved himself too much to off himself. Plus, you got to remember, he got away with it the first time. A narcissist like that believes that they can beat the system. But there's even another person involved that would suggest that this is not, okay, a suicide, and that is Epstein's lawyer. Epstein's lawyer met with Epstein the day before he allegedly committed suicide. And that lawyer said that Epstein was in a very upbeat mood. And the reason Epstein was so upbeat and positive was because his lawyer had told him that there was a chance, a good chance, that Epstein was going to get bail. Now, remember, if the judge sets bail at $10 million, this guy can get it. If he sets bail at $20 million, this guy can get it. If the judge sets bail at $50 million, Epstein's, a billionaire allegedly, is going to be able to come up with the money. But not just that, everybody. The lawyer had told Epstein the day before he commits suicide, allegedly, that the non-prosecution agreement that the government agreed to in 2008 could apply to these charges, these new charges. So he's told, hey, by his lawyer, you're going to get bail maybe, and you might get off this again. And so less than 24 hours after that meeting with his attorney, who tells him he can get bail and that this non-prosecution agreement might get him off a second time for all of these charges, he allegedly commits suicide. Okay? And so that sounds very, very, very suspicious. But listen, Epstein couldn't have done this alone, and we know that he couldn't have done this alone. You got to have financing. This guy had jets. He had this jet called the Lolita Express, and he had this island, right, that he owned, and he would fly people on his jet to his island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And so you've got to have people who are financing you. So guess what? The Epstein victims sued J.P. Morgan Chase, the bank, the biggest bank in the world. And J.P. Morgan Chase settled for $290 million to these Epstein victims because they helped finance. But not only that, everybody, the executives at J.P. Morgan Chase were participating with these young girls. That's right. They were engaging in sex with these young girls, including minors, executives at J.P. Morgan Chase. There are emails between Epstein and an executive named Jeff Staley. And you know what? Epstein emails this Jeff Staley guy, and Staley says, hey, say hi to Snow White for me. You want to know what Epstein responds? He responds, which princess do you want next? To which this disgusting piece of crap named Staley replies, how about Belle from Beauty and the Beast? Now, I want to know how young those girls were that they're joking about pretend princesses, because as you look at Disney, the original Snow White was 14 years old. So was this young girl who played Snow White of age? These are questions that need to be answered, but J.P. Morgan Chase, they didn't want any part of that, so they settled for $290 million. And they also settled with the U.S. Virgin Islands for $75 million for financing this guy. Now, if you watch the debates, you know, J.P. Morgan Chase is a bank, the biggest bank in the world. And Elizabeth Warren is the ranking member on the Senate Banking Committee. She gets to question the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase many times. And she had the CEO, Jamie Dimon, before her, and she was allowed to ask this person questions. Now, how many questions do you think that Elizabeth Warren, someone who pretends to be a champion for women and women's rights, how many questions did she ask the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase about the settlement related to Epstein? All right, let's see. Let's see if you remember this. This is the debate between me and Elizabeth Warren in October of last year.
I wish Senator Warren would attack inflation the way she attacks crypto. I wish she would attack securing the border the way she's focused on crypto. You know, she's so focused on crypto, she had the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase available for questioning, and they had financed the largest child sex trafficking operation in history with Jeffrey Epstein. And you know, Senator Warren didn't ask a single question. She wanted to talk about crypto because she's so hyper-focused. Now, I know that because I was raped as a child for a period of 2 years, I might be a little more sensitive to those child rape victims, but I want to ask Senator Warren, why would you not ask one question? J.P. Morgan Chase settled for $290 million to these rape victims. They had to settle with the U.S. Virgin Islands. And Senator Warren doesn't ask a question. You want to know why? Because a former Democrat president's involved, because her donors are involved, because people that she knows are involved. Again, loyalty to an agenda, loyalty to a party. I come in and I want transparency on everything. I'd like her to answer the question on behalf of all those rape victims, though. I can't help it when she goes to ban an entire industry that they're motivated against her because they see a viable candidate. But listen, the rules are already there. Senator Warren, you notice she didn't answer the question about those rape victims. You know, you can't call yourself a absolute warrior for women if you only select the women you're willing to protect.
All right, that was the debate between me and Elizabeth Warren, and she didn't answer the question. You know, when I was before her and I said to John Keller, I'd like her to answer that question on behalf of these child rape victims. Why didn't you, Senator Warren, ask a single question about this man and his company settling $300 million for financing the largest child sex trafficking operation in American history. And she didn't say anything, because Bill Clinton's on that list, because her ex-husband, Senator Warren's ex-husband, is on that list. When we get back, we're going to continue to unpack this Epstein situation. Listen to The Hard Truth. The Hard Truth is paid for by the Deaton Law Firm. I've been representing mesothelioma and lung cancer victims for 23 years across the Commonwealth. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer and were exposed to asbestos, you contact me at the Deaton Law Firm. That's DeatonLawFirm.com. You can also reach me here at this show at thehardtruthshow.com. That's John at hardtruthshow.com. John at hardtruthshow.com. Okay, welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Remember, you can reach the show at John at hardtruthshow.com. That's John at hardtruthshow.com. We're unpacking the explosive week dealing with Jeffrey Epstein. I just played my debate with Elizabeth Warren when I called her a hypocrite to her face for not asking any questions. And listen, now we're going to get to President Trump's new reaction to the Epstein situation. But before that, we need to remember that President Trump and many of his supporters, focused on Epstein quite a bit. His son, Donald Jr., was a huge critic. He was talking about, how does my dad get 34 felony convictions, yet not one single person gets prosecuted from the Epstein files and the Epstein situation. You had many influencers, Charlie Kirk, Megyn Kelly, all of those, Tucker Carlson, all of those people talking about Epstein. Glenn Beck, you had Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. Before they became part of the FBI, they were out there pounding the table about this. And listen, the fact is, because of the people who were involved with Epstein, they are sweeping it under the table, okay? A former president of the United States, members of Congress. Let's be honest about who was involved in this situation and who was involved with Epstein. And once President Trump became president, I want to remind people out there, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, invited those conservative influencers to the White House, and they gave them these big white binders called Epstein Phase 1, and it was documents related to Epstein, and they called it Phase 1. And then Pam Bondi was on Fox News and was asked, what about, you're going to release more documents with Epstein? And she said, yes. She said, there's thousands of hours of videotape, and the list and the files are on my desk. I just got to review them, but it takes time. And as soon as I'm done reviewing them, I'm going to redact the names of the victims, and I'm going to disclose that to the public. Okay, that was all said. They did Photoshop. And then they decide not to release it, except they're going to release, they say, a tape that proves that Epstein, committed suicide. And they release a tape that just shows like the jail cell floor. And guess what? There's 2 minutes and 53 seconds missing that has been purposefully edited out of what was released to the public. And people are outraged about it. You said you were going to give us transparency. You said there wouldn't be no longer a two-tier system of justice. We want the truth, okay? That's what people want, and that's what they did, okay? And they promised it, and they released nothing. In fact, they released garbage. They released something that has been doctored and edited. People are just sick and tired of it. I can't tell you that much. So now I'm going to play you a tape, okay? And this is from Breakthrough News. It's all over the internet. It's all over X. It is 1 minute and 28 seconds. I'm going to let it play all the way through because I want you to see what was said before and then President Trump's first reaction. He's given several statements now. I wish President Trump would take the shovel, get it out of his hand because he's digging the hole deeper and deeper. He says he doesn't want to talk. He doesn't want us to focus on Epstein. He doesn't want to talk about Epstein, but he can't stop posting or talking about it. Okay? And so check this out. I want you to listen to this. It starts with his son, Don Jr.
How is it that my father can be convicted of 34 crimes, but no one on Epstein's list has even been brought to light? I'm trying to figure out how that's possible, right, folks? It's almost like they're trying to protect those pedophiles for some reason. I can't imagine why, right?
Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
Everybody in politics has a vice that's much worse than alcoholism, is the way that I put it. But we
release the list.
Seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
In this case, in Epstein's case, it is incredibly disturbing. We have flight logs, we have information, names that will come out.
I'm not ever going to let this story go because of what I heard from a source about Bill Clinton on a plane with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not letting it go, ever. Ever.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
So that is unbelievable. President Trump says it's unbelievable that people talking about this creep. Let's just rewind. That was the president's son, Donald Jr., talking about it. You had J.D. Vance talking about it before the election, saying J.D. Vance, who's now vice president of the United States, saying release the list. You had Dan Bongino saying he would never let this go, that he will never let up. He is now the deputy director of the FBI. You had Kash Patel, who said that to Glenn Beck that the director of the FBI, before he became the director of the FBI, had all the list and the information, and all the director had to do was to release it. You had Pam Bondi, the attorney general, you heard it, saying that it was on her desk and she was going to release it. And then President Trump acts indignant, as though there's something wrong with us, and including his son and all those people, including the sitting vice president that was focused on Epstein and the Epstein list. And he just flabbergasted, it seems. And so that's a problem for President Trump. It's a serious problem because now Dan Bongino, who said he would never let it go, ever. He's never letting it go. You had Kash Patel saying they're protecting pedophiles. Okay? Now you guys are in charge. And what are you saying? You're getting on TV and you're saying, yeah, Epstein killed himself and there's nothing there. We got to move on. Come on, people. All right, don't gaslight us. Don't be like them. You know, if you're not going to release it, say you're not going to release it. But don't say you're a fool or an idiot for thinking the things that we've been talking about here tonight, okay? And President Trump has said more than that, and we're going to continue. I want to play another clip for you here, okay? And this is President Trump.
Mr. President, I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so upset about how it's been handled?
I don't understand it. Why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And the credible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would say let them have it.
Okay. Listen, he just said that pretty bad people are the ones who are interested in this toward information. And my message to the president would be, Mr. President, we're not interested in the details, okay? We're not interested in Epstein himself. We are sick and tired of no transparency in our government. We're sick and tired of a two-tiered justice system where the rich and the wealthy and the connected can get away with murder, but not even worse than murder. Is there anything worse than raping a child? I can't imagine it. And to say that because people want that transparency and they want the people that helped Epstein held accountable and that they want the files released, that somehow makes you a bad person. Listen, President Trump's wrong on this. He's right on, he may have been right on tariffs because inflation isn't up and America is collecting money that we've never seen before with his tariffs. He was certainly right about closing the southern border. And like I said, 93% of illegal crossings are down. That's fantastic. He's said he's going to make America the crypto capital of the world. You know that I'm big on crypto and Bitcoin. That's amazing. He's appointed a crypto and AI czar and David Sachs. That's fantastic. His deregulation efforts in the business sector and the energy sector, it's going to pay dividends to real Americans because energy prices, people in Massachusetts know it better than anyone, unfortunately. It's killing people. It's killing working people. When you have higher energy, it affects every price, okay? And so, sorry about that. And so America suffers with those higher energy prices. So President Trump, deregulating that industry is helpful. So, in our final 12 minutes when we come back from the break, I'll tell you what I really think. You listen to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. The Hard Truth is paid for by the Deaton Law Firm. I've been representing mesothelioma and lung cancer victims for 23 years across the Commonwealth. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer and were exposed to asbestos, you contact me at the Deaton Law Firm. That's DeatonLawFirm.com. You can also reach me here at this show at thehardtruthshow.com. That's John at hardtruthshow.com. John at hardtruthshow.com. Okay, welcome back to the show. You listen to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Remember, you can follow me on X, John E. Deaton 1. You can get Food Stamp Warrior and Amazon. You can contact the Deaton Law Firm if you're exposed to asbestos, have mesothelioma or a loved one, or you just want to listen to me rant. You can email me at John E. Deaton. You can reach me at the show at John at hardtruthshow.com. So, our final segment of the night, we're going to continue on this Epstein situation because this is not going away. People are not going to just forget the way President Trump wants. The way Dan Bongino was, okay, where he said, I'm never letting this go. That's how a lot of people feel. And President Trump can continue to insult people and say, you're a bad person if you want this list. But I think he's going to have to address this. And in that last clip, he did say, well, release a credible information. But we're going to play some more because it gets worse. And President Trump has probably had the best political instincts of any politician in modern history, to be honest with you. The man won the presidency twice, and he won the second time after being indicted after being prosecuted, after being shot at and shot. I mean, this guy has shown better political instincts than anyone, okay? And so you got to give him his due, but he is misreading the room when it comes to this issue. This is the one time that President Trump's instincts are wrong, and you're seeing it. You're whether it's Tucker Carlson or Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly, the list goes on. People are not going to let this go. So let me tell you and listen to what President Trump continues to say about this Epstein situation. Let me play you this next one, okay? And this one is a very quick one.
To be a total hoax. The 51 agents, the intelligence, so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net, and so they try and do the Democrats' work.
So there you go. Now, not only are people who want this bad people, who want transparency, who want accountability, who want bad people brought to justice, now you're a stupid Republican if you want release of the Epstein files. And now he's saying that it is a hoax, that the whole Epstein files that his people like Pam Bondi talked about. He says it's all a hoax, and he makes analogies to Russia, and the Steele dossier, and I don't understand it. And the reason I don't understand it, because we got to go with facts, people. Epstein was first arrested when George W. Bush was president. He was then next arrested in 2019. In 2019, President Trump was the president. When Epstein was killed or hung himself, whatever happened, President Trump was the president. His Attorney General, William Barr, was the one that signed off on it being a suicide. And so the list that was all done and the documents were collected under a Trump administration. Now, sure that it's Biden, was president after that, and sure, you had Christopher Wray and all those people at the FBI who might not be Trump fans, but this all happened under Trump's presidency. Like, that's the fact. So it's not a hoax. And to call it a hoax and to call us stupid Republicans because we're demanding the release of this information, it's just not right. And President Trump is losing support. And now, do I think it's going to derail his presidency? I'm not suggesting that, people. Am I saying that the Epstein files are more important than inflation? Of course not. Am I saying that it's more important than immigration? Of course not. Am I saying it's more important than foreign wars and what's going on in Iran and the Middle East? Of course not. Is it as important as the housing crisis? Of course not. Is it as important as the opioid addiction? Of course not. Is it as important as healthcare in this country? Of course not. Is it as important as voter confidence and potential problems in voting and election integrity? Of course not, right? So I can continue to go on, but that doesn't mean you're stupid because you want transparency and you want people to be held accountable. Okay, now that's just reality. So I'm going to play you, my last clip for the show, and we're going to talk about it. And
please do not let that story.
All right, this is we're going to start with Dan Bongino. Here we go.
Please do not let that story go.
Who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
Black Book?
FBI.
But who? That is that. I mean, there's.
Oh, that's under direct control of the director of the FBI.
What the hell are the House Republicans doing? They have the majority. You can't get the list? Put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would. All right. I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know it. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would.
This isn't about Epstein or 9/11 or JFK or RFK. It is, but it isn't. It's about a bigger thing. If you're lying about that, you're lying about everything. Who's on the Epstein tapes, folks? Who's on those tapes? Who's in those black books? Why have they been hiding it?
And this is something Donald Trump has talked about. The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
Everything's going to come out to the public. The public has a right to know. Americans have a right to know.
Okay, so who were those people? That was Dan Bongino, before he was the deputy director of the FBI, going off. Is he a bad guy? Is he a stupid Republican? That was Kash Patel telling Glenn Beck that release it. Why are you protecting pedophiles? And he said it's at the director of the FBI. The director of the FBI has it. Ladies and gentlemen, who is now the director of the FBI? It's Kash Patel. It's that same guy. And now all of a sudden, he's got amnesia. All of a sudden, he's the one protecting pedophiles. So you could see why this was a big problem. Listen to Pam Bondi. That's the Attorney General saying that the American people deserve the truth. They deserve to know. I can't explain why President Trump is doing such a 180. His son, all of these big supporters who are now part of his administration, all demanded what you and I have been demanding, what we're still demanding. But now we're stupid, and now we're bad people. And I could see why Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, that there was some kind of fallout. And one of them were going to leave. Now, President Trump has herded them back in. Listen, some people say, well, President Trump is acting as if he's in the files. And you got a lot of his distractors saying that's the reason. Now, the counter to that, of course, is that President Trump, if he was in the Epstein files, if there was evidence that he did anything bad, we certainly would have heard it. It would have been released by Biden, or Kamala Harris when they were running against him, because they'd have had that information and they would have used it for sure to stop him from becoming president. And they didn't do that. That's a very valid argument. Now, some would counter that argument with saying, yeah, but that would also mean that they have to, let the Bill Gateses of the world off the hook. Bill Gates donated $50 million to Kamala Harris. Some would argue that, there was no reason to release those things, this file, the Epstein list, the Epstein file, because Democratic donors are going to be outed. And that will dry up the money, those big multi-million-dollar donations. And so, I don't know the answer. President Trump had kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago one time. So, I don't know. I'm struggling to try to give a rational response or reason to something that I find completely irrational. Now, there's a personal reason, I guess, why I'm so vested. I believe you always should disclose your confirmation bias. And when you heard that clip of me talking to Elizabeth Warren and that she didn't ask questions about those child rape victims, I disclosed that I might be a little more sensitive to the issue because I was raped as a child between the ages of 9 and 11 for a period of 2 years by a child predator in the neighborhood. And I write about it in my book right here, Food Stamp Warrior. It is the smallest chapter in this book of mine, And I get into the graphic details. It was horrific, and I won't get on those